Elizabeth Holmes 19岁就创立了公司 Theranos， 一个血液检测的公司。很快的，她成为了矽谷的闪亮之星。那这家公司当初的市值也超过了90亿的美金。她成功的说服了企业家跟政治家投资她的公司，但这一切都是骗局。但是她到底是如何达到这么惊人募资的成效呢？ Maybe it has to do with her communication style.Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管双语沟通力的 podcast。我们希望带给大家最实用的沟通工具，包括了成功人士对全球市场的分享、职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。Hi, I'm Sherry, founder of Executive Plus.As a language trainer and certified coach, I've trained hundreds of managers from Fortune 500 companies such as Dior, Google, Deloitte, and Yahoo!And
I'm Nick, Director of Communication Strategy at Presentality. I've helped startups raise millions of US dollars in funding and train the executives of publicly listed companies to present on the global stage.
Welcome to the Executive Plus podcast,
where you can take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast.In this episode, we're going to cover someone quite controversial, Elizabeth Holmes. Now, her trial has just come back up and begun, but we don't want to cover the current news. We want to talk about her communication style. She was able to convince very powerful, wealthy, and intelligent people to invest in her. And now we look back at the way she talks and think, oh, they should have seen it coming.But for a very long time, she was the star of almost every newspaper, magazine, and investor, which means she had certain parts of her communication that were very effective. And we want to go back and look at what it was that allowed her to speak so well.
那当然我们要先提一下，今天我们不是来教大家要如何成为说谎专家 OK？But, you know, 他19岁就能够创业，再加上他让那么多人，而且是都非常厉害的人能够募资投资他。You know, 这些人包括了 Rupert Murdoch, he's the head of Fox. And then, you know, you got George Shultz, and then you have that Betty DeVos. 各式各样的政治人物啊，或者是企业家，他们都投了非常多的钱在他身上。And how did she actually get to do that?
Many people said that her speaking style, her way of connecting people, was incredibly powerful, and it allowed her to grab the attention of people who otherwise may not have looked at this very young college dropout and backed her for what became a large-scale medical company. But there was certain things in her tone, in her speaking style, in the way that she looked at people that really grabbed their attention.
所以其实如果大家有稍微看他的一些报道，或者是有听过他的 TED Talk， 我不知道这个 TED 是不是还在这个 TEDmed 里面这个 platform， but we have a link for you guys and you'll hear how she sound. 你会发现 she has a very low pitch voice, incredibly low pitch, like a baritone voice.There
was a lot of controversy around whether this was her real voice or whether this is just a voice that she used in order to get attention. But it's hard to deny the effectiveness of it because a lot of times when you look at advice on public speaking, they'll talk about your tone of voice will affect the way that people perceive you, meaning...Automatically, most people with a lower register, a lower tone, are usually considered either A, more authoritative, or B, more trustworthy. There's a psychological principle there. And so her low voice, whether authentic or not, got used a lot as her way to build that level of confidence and that level of authority when she was speaking, even though she was quite young when she began the company.And
another thing that we actually talked about it in our previous podcast is that when you hear her speaking, 你如果听到她讲话，你会发现她的 intonation 都是往下，每一句都是往下。She has a downward intonation.
Which gives a lot of a feeling of being factual.
Yeah.
So even when she's offering an opinion, even when she's discussing something that may be less fact-based, or it may be less objective and it's more subjective, with that downward intonation, it sounds a lot like a statement. It sounds a lot like a fact.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of saying, this is powerful, you go, this is powerful, right? You kind of go downwards. 一样会让你听起来非常的有自信，非常的 powerful.
So you'll see her use this a lot. In previous episodes, we've also talked about the use of short sentences with pauses. And this is something she uses a lot. In her TED-Med talk, you hear this to the point where it's a little excessive. And in the comments, people are like, oh, thank God for 2x speed.
Right.
Because she pauses a lot.
Yeah.
No, again, now we look back at it and go, oh, it's because she didn't have a lot to say. But the reality is it's a very effective speaking technique to give short sentences with a pause, or pause in the middle of long sentences to really drive home certain ideas, certain thoughts.
我们之前其实也有跟大家常常说要多用你的 pauses. 当然我觉得不用到他这样子那么的 extreme. When you use your pause, people actually listen to you very carefully.
This is an example that we use quite often from TechCrunch's startup Battlefield, where they have a demo day. And one of the most recent winners from 2020 used pauses very effectively, Canex. And what pauses allow you to do is keep your idea clear and really highlight certain parts of your idea so that no one can miss what is going on. Many people believe eloquence comes from long, flowy sentences with big words, but you'll actually find across CEOs, across politicians, across even presidents, the people who know how to make things very simple, very intuitive, and easy for their audience to listen to are the ones that you want to listen to. We've talked about previously, a lot of people criticized Trump for having a 5-year-old's vocabulary or talking like a 5-year-old. But it's incredibly effective.
Yeah.
It's incredibly effective because there's no misunderstanding what he's saying. You can agree, you can disagree, but when he's talking to his audience, there's no fluffy roundabout. It's like, this is what I believe.
There is no barrier to his speech at all. Like anyone can understand it.
And so what Elizabeth Holmes does well is she talks about things that anyone can understand about a technology that should be very difficult to understand.
那在接下来也就是我们最后一个它非常 unique 的一个 communication style 也就是 eye contact. Now, if you read the book Bad Blood 或者是你看任何关系跟它的相关的文章一定都会有人提到它的eye contact. She has a very fierce eye contact.
And this is something that gets used to describe a lot of famous people who were charmers.
Yeah.
They knew how to make people like gravitate towards them. And they actually call this the reality distortion field. Elizabeth Holmes was claimed to have it. Steve Jobs was famous for having this. Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
I actually remember there was an interview with a woman who said that when Bill Clinton walked into a room, he would go and shake everyone's hand and look deeply at that person. And for that moment, it would distort reality. And she said it was so powerful the way that he was able to connect with you in a few seconds that you would go home and sit by your phone expecting him to call you. Like that's how powerful that moment of connection was. Where you're like, yeah, this guy must have just knows me. He's going to call me any minute now.
Yeah. So I think Elizabeth Holmes, with her eye contact, she was able to really capture the attention of a lot of very powerful people.
So with these three things, one, lower register of voice. I don't think you need to go to her extreme where potentially that's not your real voice. But you'll notice that when you want to have authority, parents do this all the time. When they're angry or they want to shoot, they will go into a very low, serious register. This gives a tone of authority. It also gives a tone of confidence. So when she's giving information, it sounds less subjective and it sounds more like it's a fact. What I say is not an opinion, it is the truth. So if you want to sound confident or to have authority, that lower tone of register. The second thing is don't worry about long, flowy, difficult to understand sentences. It's actually about making things simple and understandable. Short sentences and use pauses effectively if your sentence is longer. And then the last thing is simply have eye contact. Now, don't creepily stare at someone until they're uncomfortable, but a lot of times it's that idea of, especially younger people. Now, I know this is somewhat of a cliche in Asia, and certain cultures, especially Japanese, eye contact is a very nuanced thing. But the reality is, for a lot of Western culture, eye contact is really important. And anyone who is looking away or who is not maintaining eye contact immediately feels a little less authentic, a little less trustworthy. So strong eye contact and genuinely showing that you're listening or engaged in the conversation will drastically increase someone's willingness to listen to you.
So I think eye contact, I know sometimes it feels uncomfortable to kind of look into someone's eyes for a very long time.
Yeah.
我之前听说有些人的技巧就是看人家的 eyebrows. To another person, it feels like they're looking at you, right? But you're actually just looking at the eyebrows. You're not looking at the eyes. So it makes you feel slightly better. You can take a little break.
Right.
So 如果你觉得说一直注视人家的眼睛觉得很奇怪 you know, 你可以稍微往他上面看或者看到他的额头的部分 maybe that will make you feel a little bit better. And I think for Elizabeth Holmes, she has huge eyes. And it's not something that everyone has. She has huge eyes. So maybe that's one of the things. But again, you know, using the 3 tips and tricks that we talked about, of course, we don't have to be liars, but we can be a very good communicator.
We hope that you learned something, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
如果你喜欢我们的 podcast， 欢迎来追踪我们的主管英文 Executive Plus 的 Facebook。那也可以写信到我们的信箱 yourcareerplus@gmail.com。